One second, I'm getting a weird noise. Okay, yeah, I'm getting. Yeah, there was some during the debate. There were some weird noises coming from Scientia, and I don't know what it was. It was actually like he was saying Joe's name 1,000 times. But anyways, um, we are going to have a little after show about the debate that Scientia Perceptum had with Joe, the creationist. I don't even know how to say Joe's last name. Most of us, how do you say it? I have no idea how to say it. But anyways, yeah, it was entertaining, but just my ears were bleeding by the time that it got done because Joe was not taking in anything that Scientia was saying. Matter of fact, he was so focused on the polystrate trees, and it was noted to him that one, they're not actually trees. I mean, they're actually lycopods. They're club moss, and they don't go through strata. They just have mud layers that have been settled down because they're bogs. And he made it sound like they're actually really trees, and over a period of, a single flood, went through multiple strata being all laid down at once. And he actually thinks that's a solid model. That's a little scary.
You're scary.
I am scary. By the way, Hannah, how are you? I missed you.
No, you didn't. It's been like a day.
I know, but it still has to make you feel good.
I'm drunk lifting with cheese in one
cool.
hand.
No, I wish I
feel like playing Fuck the Police.
Scientia, how do you think you did, though? I mean, obviously you did personally did exceptionally well, but would you even call it a debate, though? Because I didn't see any debating. He provided not a single solitary shred of empirical or scientific information of any kind. Did I lose you? Do you have any victory dance, victory brandy or something?
I think issue with his mic.
I don't know. Well, he was having severe computer issues. Joe wasn't lying when he said that the computer was going Joe, like 500 times. It was really strange.
Yeah, because he unmuted himself. He's just not speaking, so it's probably a computer issue.
Yeah, because I can't hear you, Scientia. So if you're
Am I
talking,
talking now?
you're going to have to. Oh, yep, there you go.
Sorry.
There you go. All right. So let's get your feedback on it, because I watched most of your first one and second one that you had with him, and I knew going in that the guy was just not all quite there. But you don't really think you're actually getting through to him, right? So I'm assuming that you're doing it for the listening audience to show them what happens when people go down this path of young Earth creationism.
Yeah, and that's why, I think it was about halfway through when I just realized that there basically was going to be nothing from him that he hasn't done before. He has this, this script that he just seems to read from, and he doesn't deviate from it at all. So at that point at which, I kept saying, hey, you're introducing the same stuff. I'm going to go over this again that we talked about in our last debate. I'm going to see if you understand any of this. And, once he kind of got to that point where he was just reading from his script again is when, I just started to kind of, go into Socratic ridicule mode. I couldn't think of anything else to do but just point out how insane he sounds.
No light at the end of the tunnel?
Script. What's that, Anna?
There was no light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, there was that guy he's not even working with a 20-watt bulb. I mean, there's nothing upstairs. I could tell that he was working off a script, and it did sound like he had chick tracks.
What he started, with the human evolution, that was right off a chick track.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I don't think he has any concept of what evolution is, how to distinguish it between that and common descent. He has no concept of phylogeny whatsoever.
Yeah.
Genetics, nothing there. His population growth models, I damn shat myself. I'm like, does he not understand what a linear regression is as compared to an exponential growth? And anyways, we're humans. In fact, you haven't seen it, but I actually had it was not really a debate, but it was close to it, with me and General Han Solo was there in a panel of, and we had a guy named Jay Hall, and he was an author, a young Earth creationist author, and he was a mathematician. He had a master's degrees in math. And he had told me some of the arguments he wanted to use before he came on for my panel. And I said, fine. It was basically diffusion of helium through zircons.
Mm-hmm.
It was atmospheric ratios, carbon ratios in the atmosphere. And it was growth rates. Okay, I'm like, okay, fine. And he was using a straight exponential growth rate for hominids, not even taking into account deaths. So basically, his birth rate was such that they were continuing to breed for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, and then he was wondering why his numbers were like, oh, well, we should be seeing 72 trillion humans. And me and Fiona were like, are you kidding? You're a mathematician and you don't understand that. I mean, we're not bacteria. We're not going to use an exponential growth rate.
Yeah, I really don't know if you know, there's plenty of people out there that I need to get on to your chats more. I'll definitely do that, your hangouts more, and talk with some other creationists, because the ones on Twitter are really kind of very much all taking their sources from the same thing. They really seem to be. The other thing that I've noticed with them is that they're all using, you know, mainly Hovind arguments, and they're using answers in Genesis, but they don't even understand the arguments that they're trying to present. That is the hardest part about this. Is and you know, I point this out. You know, I studied creationism after getting my bachelor's in science. I studied it as a dual degree in philosophy of science. I studied the history of it, so I kind of know where, you know, certain movements have started. You know, the certain leaders of them, and I really am starting to have a feeling that the majority of creationists out there don't even understand what their creationist websites that they're trying to present to you are actually saying. And not only don't they understand that, they don't understand, you know, the other side of it. It's something about, yeah, it is very true. It's something about, you know, debating is that you should try to know your opponent's subject better than they do. But I think that is just a given for most of the people who claim to, you know, support creationism, is that most of us know their arguments better than they do, and we can teach them about it. We can teach them the history behind it, and how this concept came about and who said it to begin with.
Yeah, I'll get you the link for that one. That's exactly what happened with Jay Hall. We knew his arguments better than he did. I had actually just got done reading a lot of the rate stuff that Humphreys had worked on. And so I just talked to Dr. Shafati about it like a couple weeks prior. So I knew what the arguments were. He didn't. So yeah, I think you're exactly right. And also, a lot of these creationists, they have a mantra. They parrot this information. For example, when he quote mined Origin of Species, especially what Darwin said about the eye, I mean, we all know what Darwin said about the eye. We know what follows from that, right? We know it's a typical quote mine. And we know what they're going to do with this stuff. And I don't know why you didn't read the rest of it, because it says, right, if I remember correctly, right after that, Darwin says that, he says something about what we can determine using, you know, a gradient.
Modern analogs, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, he was setting it up to say, look, this would normally be something that's absurd, but look, I have an understanding of how it did happen. You know, he didn't use teleonomics, but it basically is a teleonomic explanation.
And I tried to explain that to Joe as well. It's that Darwin does that. I mean, he does that in all of his writings. It's not just on the Origin of Species. He does that in Descent of Man. He does it even in some of his writings on barnacles. He uses that same kind of rhetoric to introduce a subject, and then to go back and to explain the subject based off of what he's observed, what he has gathered. And yeah, it's odd that I don't even think that Joe knows what a quote mine is.
Yeah, Dawkins does the same thing. Yeah. Dawkins a lot of that same rhetoric. Yeah. No, I don't think he knew what cherry picking was. No. I don't think he knew what quote mining was.
I mean, when I had to explain to him what a linear regression is.
Yeah, that was strange. I mean, you weren't reading the Q&A, but I put it in the slide there. I'm like, didn't we learn, y equals mx plus b in, like, I don't know, 10th grade or something? 9th grade, I don't know what the hell it was.
I learned it.
Well, yeah, you're just a smarty pants.
No, I went to a fucking pompous school.
Anyways, do you know the rest of the crew? I mean, you and I have talked online, but not actually like been in the same room. We just communicated, and but I mean, do you know my group here that like joins me all the time? And
I think I've seen some
my
of the
stalkers.
avatars that are up there, but no, not really.
Well, let me introduce you because I don't know if they know who you are. Some of them might. You probably know Sam, right? Sam the scientist.
I'm not sure. How about everyone just says hello? That'd be great.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, long time no see.
So we got.
Hey.
We got.
Hey, how you doing, Rob?
You know Joe? You know Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we got a pretty eclectic group that usually tries to hang out. I mean, we got let's see, physics, biology, genetic biology, fossil hunter, and then we got Hannah. We don't know what she does, but hey, she looks good. So
Yeah.
that's all that matters.
Yeah,
She's like
really nice looking.
Yeah, her and Hannah are great. They don't have to know anything, but they just got to like talk every so often, and people just flock to my channel and I get views. It's great.
That's all I'm good for.
I'm so shallow.
I'm a view whore.
But I mean, I wish you could have got Joe to come in. I would have liked to ask him a few questions too.
Well,
but
you can invite him now. He might be around still.
We'll try. I don't have a contact info, but yeah, invite him in. I mean, we're very civil to creationists when they come in. But and this wasn't your fault. This was just the structure. But he gish galloped way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much.
They all do.
Yeah. Well, they have to, because what they got to do is they have to try to get it back to atheism. Because as you noted, it's not about science. There's no such thing as creation science. Okay, this is no such thing. There's creationism, and then they try to call it science to try to promote creationism.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Well, it's not just that though. I mean, I can go on one subject that I'm familiar with because it's what I work in. I can go into increasing levels of detail for very long period of time, and I know Sam could too, and a lot of us who actually read about these things could, but the creationists, they don't have depth of knowledge. They have surface level, and so if they're going to talk for a long period of time, they've got to hit 100 different topics, because otherwise what do? They only have 10 seconds of material on each topic.
Yeah, they go for breadth, not depth.
Mm-hmm.
They want to throw out as much as they can and see what sticks.
But I think it goes a little bit beyond that too sometimes. Like I was just in Neffy's hangout, and there's plenty of people that were open to hearing arguments from evolution and all that. But in the end, they have not even a surface level understanding of evolution. They're looking at this from the point of view, completely top-down point of view. So whatever you say, if it doesn't fit within their box of what they think it is, then clearly it's not true. And then C, if you were to try to explain why logically this could make sense, immediately they double down and say, no, then you clearly are the one that's misunderstanding, even though that's not the case at all. Like it's happening right now in Neffy's room where this guy named Determinus, he's clearly got some sort of scientific background. He's explaining it quite calmly why Neffy's wrong, and Neffy is just completely misrepresenting every single point, and everybody's just jumping on those misrepresentations.
Well, and that's why you can't have a conversation in those rooms. John and I have learned that very well. We've learned our lesson. So that's not going to happen. Yeah, no, I appreciate your valor to go in there and give it a shot, but yeah, there's no way you can have a scientific conversation with Neffy or true empiricism in their room, because they want to dominate the conversation and lead it back to what they want to go to.
I mean,
howdy, guys.
Hey, well, howdy.
Hello.
Hey.
I mean, it was definitely civil. It was just I could not. I think what time did I clock Neffy at? I think the longest he went without stopping to take for breath was 6 minutes and 40 seconds. I think.
That's insane.
That's short. That's short for Neffy.
Yeah, I've seen him do 20-minute stretches.
He can't be talking this long. There's no way. Time just seems relatively slow to me. I put on Google stopwatch and it's 6:40. Look, are you serious? And the moment I get a chance to speak, it's just like, oh no, you meant this. I'm like, Neffy, please just stop. 1 minute, like 1 minute.
You timed it at 6:40, but I'm sure it felt much longer.
Oh yeah.
Well, I wanted to tell Scientia. Is that how you pronounce your name, Scientia?
Yeah, Scientia, yeah.
Scientia. Um, I wanted to tell you that your efforts are not in vain because people do listen and they do change their mind. Wayne Fillmore here is a perfect example of
I
somebody
know
who
Wayne well.
Yeah, just 6 months ago, obviously was a young creationist, and he got smart, and now he's like freaking amazing. The guy is like on fire. He's like thirsting for knowledge. It's beautiful. Oh, by the way, he almost got in a car accident, or he did get in a car accident. So, Gwen,
Oh my
I got to ask, you okay, and it's not still shaking up, and
Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, I'm fine. I didn't get hurt, fortunately, so I'm okay.
yeah, because don't die on me. I swear to God, I'll hunt you down and kill you. Yeah.
Very practical.
Yeah, it's efficient. Yeah, well, I'll resurrect him first. Christians believe that. So
It's so common in the Old Testament. Why not?
I told him on Facebook. I was like, look, I know you're like believe in God and everything, but don't be in a huge rush to go meet him, right? Did you get a hold of Joe?
I did send him the link.
He'll have to let us know because it's full. But yeah, I mean, I would have loved to address some single points with him but he was just so all over the place. But his understanding of the polystrate fossils was just killing me. Why that is a young Earth creationist claim is beyond me.
Yeah, I'll have to. I actually did a little bit on that on the Joggins formation. I wrote a paper about it, and I included some. I'll dig that up. I mean, that was it's probably on like an old floppy disk, but I'm sure I could find it. I kept it all.
I would love to read that. Jade would probably like to read that too.
Yeah, and from kind of my memory, it is basically the idea that there's no understanding about how such things can form over such long periods of time, and that's basically where the whole argument comes in. I'm pretty sure it's from Genesis Flood. I almost want to run upstairs and get the book now, but I'm pretty sure that's where one of the first times it was mentioned is that if these things took millions of years, and this is what Joe was saying, if they took millions of years, they would have rotted away. In my last time that I spoke with him a couple months ago, debate number 2 is I started to bring that up at one point and just quit. But I think the main thing that he is not getting here is that, and this is why I kept trying to say, this is your hypothesis. Let's test it. Let's see what the evidence is. So if this is from a flood, and you guys probably all heard this if you've watched either tonight's or the first one, then shouldn't all of the sediments be flood? Shouldn't they all be marine sediments purely? And if they're not, what does that mean? And trying to get him to respond to that is next to impossible. Trying to get him to say, well, no, you're right, they're not marine, so here's how I think they actually formed in a worldwide flood. But he can't go that extra step. He can't, critically look at it and say, okay, I see what you're saying. I'm accepting these sediments are obviously not, a marine flood sediment, and therefore, where can I go from there to explain it in a way that still fits the hypothesis I'm trying to present?
Well, that's I've asked people about this, what they think about the sedimentary layers, and I've gotten the impression that a lot of creationists think there's just one type of sedimentary layer. They don't realize there's so many different types, right? Whether it's gypsum, feldspar, sandstone, whatever. It's a whole bunch of different types of sedimentary layers. And Nephi uses one thing that all the other people that follow Nephi will use as well. He'll be like,
bending.
There's 1,800 meters of sedimentary layer all over the world. What he's neglecting to mention is that that's an average.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and average across the continents. And in some places there's 0, and in some places there's 15,000. Okay, and a worldwide flood is not going to have that kind of disproportionate distribution. But he doesn't want to have to address that, right?
Yeah. So I actually brought up a little bit of that in. So if you search my name in Nephilim Pre, you will see on YouTube that there's a short segment, I think it's about half hour long, where I was talking with him. And that's out of like 4 hours. So I don't know what he did with the other 4 hours. He just wanted to pick out that little part and, try to put some text in back of it. trying to explain what he was saying and explain what I was saying. But the argument that he brings up, and Joe did the same thing, is how do these layers bend? And they don't understand that when you have things under different amounts of pressure, different amounts of heat, that they are not solid any longer. This is like simple sixth grade science of, hey, what are the phases of matter? Well, we know what the three main phases are. We can talk about plasma, but what happens when you put these substances under conditions that don't appear on the Earth's surface? What occurs then?
Do you know there's 6 now? See, I learned 5.
Besides Einstein's Bose-Condensate.
Yeah, but there's another one they just discovered literally not more than a few months ago.
Oh, I think I may have seen this, but
yeah,
but that's the whole thing, is that they can't get beyond that real basic level of understanding, and then try to extrapolate new discoveries into what they have already kind of got stuck in their mind is the reality of the situation, whatever it might be.
Well, how much of that do you think it's about the fact that these are not people that think systematically about things? One of the things that I try to do whenever I take on, a research project in the lab is that I need to set up a framework by which I'm inserting each new observation and each new calculation and statistical test. Whereas you have a group of people here where, and Neffy is obviously an extreme case where it's not a process of, let's try to construct from the bottom up the most reasonable, a reasonable worldview that is amenable to new information. It's, let's only find things that fit observations that I would like.
Yes.
Confirmation bias.
Yes, it is.
In a word, confirmation bias, yeah.
We have a very sexy man, John, here that wants to actually.
Oh, thank you. You did a really good job on that debate, though. I thought you were really good. And when he was asking for other information that may confirm the ages, I'm going to give you 3 lines that I usually use, and I would like for you to give your take on them, to hear what you would have to say about them. One is ice core samples. The other is barb layers. Barb layers in the Green River Shale. And the third is the shifting north and south magnetic poles. And I'll just mute here and listen to you. Thank you.
I did bring up VARVs and ice core samples a couple different times. I brought them up. I brought up the ice core samples a little bit in this recent one, and VARVs and ice core samples I brought up in kind of various ways, not specifically talking about those with Joe, but I think the way that the creationists most often respond to these examples is by going back to the old trope of some barbs aren't specifically annual, or some ice layers lay down at a quicker rate, and that is that cherry picking of evidence again, of saying, here's this one piece of evidence, and I'm going to ignore everything else, and I'm not even going to respond to what you were bringing up where it might conflict with my view. As far as the magnetic shifting of the poles, I brought that up last time I debated with Joe, and showing him how you have 2 pieces of evidence that match each other, and that would be the spreading oceanic, the divergent zones at a spreading oceanic center, and how you have magnetic reversals as one piece of evidence, and how it matches volcanoes on the land, and those are radiometrically dated. So then you have 2 pieces of evidence there. And then the third piece of evidence, of course, being that we have the known rate today at which sea floor spreading is occurring, say, at the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And if you actually look, that rate being, about whatever it is, 2 centimeters a year, that rate then also matches the radiometric dating that matches the radiometric dating on land with the volcanoes. So why do these 2 dates match? And that's the whole thing, and I'm not sure who it is. The guy with the svelte-looking Darth Vader and stormtroopers in the back, brought it up that you introduce these little pieces of evidence into the equation, and then you try to explain them using those new pieces of evidence. You bring in one piece of evidence, okay, how does my model change? You bring in another piece of evidence, how does the model change? Is it still consistent with our expectations? And you keep adding those pieces of evidence individually, but you also look at them from their own perspective, and you say, okay, here's what this one says, here's what this one says, here's what this one says. Okay, how did we get to those observations? And then you add them all together and you say, okay, why do we see this pattern occurring? And I think, with many of these creationists, they are still really in the concrete stages. They are just rote memorizers, and they are not looking abstractly and bringing in different sets of data to see how they relate to one another.
Yeah, when you do bring it up to them,
Thanks, Sam.
their
That would be
eyes glass
subjective,
over.
wouldn't it?
I brought that up to Jungle the other day. I don't know if you guys actually watched that long 4-hour debacle that Jib had talked me into, addressing Jungle about relativity. And I at some point I had mentioned something to the effect of the magnetic reversals. I think it was that Hangout, but it could have been one of the other ones. But these things are drifting apart like 2.5 centimeters annually, and the poles reverse every 200,000 years. And I was trying to explain to him that we can see the alternating light and dark colored bands. We can see it. We can measure how fast the stuff's coming out. We can show there's a pattern here. It's not that complicated, but they have to have their filter mechanism such that they can't accept it no matter what, because it can't be 200,000 years of reversal, because that would just destroy young Earth creationism. So they have to find whatever it takes, no matter how extreme, to try to say that can't happen. Even off all the data, exactly as you said, there's a consilience and says, oh look, yeah, this is perfectly matching what we're seeing right now for the way the continents are moving from each other.
And there's this constant, cherry picking of information. There's the constant cherry picking of information where they don't see that their one point of data is refuted by something else they're going to bring up later. And so there's this internal inconsistency that is self-refuting, it's self-contradicting. They always have to stick with the one thing, and then they have to gish gallop to something else, and they have to gish gallop to something else, and they don't want to pursue that one piece of evidence with anything else. They just want to stick with the one piece, and they don't want to say, okay, well, yes, you have this one piece of evidence. Okay, where did we get that evidence from to begin with? I mean, why do we even have this? What is the history behind it? And then how has it changed over time? How has that evidence been adapted with new observations, with new technologies? They don't want to go those extra steps and really dig down deep to understand the history behind it and why we even have this idea to begin with. They just want to say it, and they want you to believe it as said. They want you to take it as scripture.
Well, like you said, it's all rote memorization. They don't learn concepts; they learn how to parrot things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing is, with a lot of, we're dealing with what are ostensibly messier sciences than something like chemistry or physics. And so there are going to be exceptions, but there are ways to examine those exceptions that are principled, right? The example that comes to mind, I'm pretty dreadful at geology, to be honest, but when you look at dating methods in specific carbon dating, I know that you need to do a correction because the ratio of C12 to C14 was different for a large period of time. I want to say like 10,000 years ago or so, when the Earth was receiving fewer or more cosmic rays. I don't remember. But that's really interesting, and so you can learn, this is how you correct for that. There's a very principled way of learning, and instead all they go is, see, this, they had to calibrate this, therefore it's wrong.
Yeah, that's one of Hovind's arguments too, because he talks about there's not time for to have an equilibrium because of actually cosmic rays hitting the upper atmosphere forming nitrogen is going to adjust the ratio of C14 to C12. But we know how to adjust for that. We also know how to adjust for the testing that we did. It's like 160% error correction factor. We know what we need to do to get something that's going to have a correct measurement. And then he said something really strange. Didn't he say something about carbon dating rocks at some point? Is that what I heard him say?
I've heard that said by quite a lot of creationists. So I don't
I think
know if
Yeah,
it's
what
just.
I think it's people. A lot of them just use carbon dating as a generic for radiometric dating. They don't understand that there are other kinds.
They don't make any distinction. They just assume it's the only way that fossils are dated.
And then they also don't understand that carbon dating can only be used with one specific thing, and that is something that only existed absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. And Hovind does this a lot. They don't understand that you can't use organisms that are deep sea organisms because then the carbon's not coming directly from the atmosphere. It's had time to decay over time. And the other thing that someone else just brought up is the idea that, let's use dating to date, something like a diamond. Okay, why does diamond still have carbon-14 in it? And they don't understand that that is not an atmospheric source, so we can't use it. And they don't also understand that you can have carbon-14 in other sources that are not organic because it is made not by cosmic rays, it's made by other radiation sources from the Earth, for example.
Yeah, the alluvial diamonds that they used for the rates project was exactly that.
Yeah.
They were diamonds found next to deposits of radiation and thorium,
yeah.
which is going to be a source, and that's why they found carbon-14 in it, right? Sarfati didn't want to have to address that when I brought it up to him. And the other thing you just mentioned about, you meant obviously the reservoir effect, but
yeah.
I don't know if you watched the video that when I talked to Hovind, I pointed out 2 radiometric dating claims that were completely demonstrably false. There is no ambiguity at all. And he said, well, I can't go back in time to change my handbook, but you should be more concerned about what's printed today. I'm like, well, I'm not asking you to go back and change the handbook. You can't time travel, but will you be using these claims going forward? And, he kind of sidestepped the issue, but he was caught because you know as well as I do the radiometric journal that he used didn't cite baby Dima, as he said it did. And the woolly mammoth that was in there, one of them was contaminated, and I have that journal. I have that one. It was the stratigraphic
quaternary
stratigraphic and glacier in Alaska.
Yeah,
685.
685. Okay, so if you do a Google search of Infidel Guy and Kent Hovind, you'll find it on the archive.org. You'll find the audio recording. I spent a good 15, 20 minutes on that show with Kent Hovind going over every single one of the sources pretty much that he brought up in the quaternary stratigraphic research of ungulaciated Alaska, and kept trying to get him to basically say, yes, I'm using this incorrectly, and he just won't do it.
See, I know whether people have brought it up to him. Definitely wasn't the first, but I was the closest I think that he's came to say he's not going to use it anymore because he said I can't go back and change it.
But he's still
acknowledgement.
I mean, how
he's still going to use it. Yes, of course he's still going to use it. I have no doubt. He's a lying.
I brought this up with him back. Boy, when was that? It was 2003. And he's still using the same arguments. He doesn't. Yeah, he's not going to do it.
Yeah, of course not. He's like, well, just email me, what you have. And I'm like, dude, other people have told you this shit too. I'm just pointing it out on my Hangouts, or actually it was True's, but so I can get it on my channel that you've been called out on it again. But people lap this stuff up, right? I mean, if I hear one more creationist go, well, radiometric dating is just full of assumptions, and they don't give me a reason why those assumptions are invalid, I realize I'm dealing with somebody who's just absolutely parroting. Because that's what I do. They're like, oh, it's just you have assumptions. Well, so what?
So here is I think my main question is how do we actually get people who are in this mindset to actually look at the data that we are presenting critically and to actually then do their own research and find out why they are making the claims that they are making. I mean, I think Wayne would be a great person to actually speak on this because I think he went through that process himself. But how do we get people to actually look this up when they are confronting us with what they think is their best argument for the worldwide flood, the Noachian flood happening? How do we get them to say, okay, yes, I will research that. I'm going to look into what you were saying. I'm going to see how it actually does match with the actual evidence that's out there. And
Well,
how does that match with my claim that I'm making?
with a lot of younger creationists, or even with just a lot of people who are religious, people who hold to certain religious beliefs, they think that if they go and they research these things, that people are telling them, that maybe they'll have to give up their faith, or maybe God doesn't exist, or whatever. And so the best thing to do first is try and talk about, how if these claims happen to be true, nothing will change. They still can, go to church and believe in their God, etc. But maybe their interpretation of how their God did, this particular thing in their religious text, maybe it didn't happen in a particular model they hold to. So it's different models and different accounts and different interpretations. And the interpretations they hold to, it's not going to send them to hell if they change their interpretation or anything like that. So, like, as for me, because I'm a Christian, I understood, like, my faith wasn't in younger creationism, and if younger creationism was wrong, it wasn't the end of the world.
And that's
Thank
the
you,
big
Wayne.
thing. Yeah, that's a good answer, because that's true. You have to get them out of the mindset that if they realize that if they give up younger creationism, it's not going to change their fundamental belief in Christianity. God's not going to say, "Oh, well, you don't accept younger creationism, I'm sending you to hell," because that's what they've been raised with. That's the mentality. Hovind and Ham and all of them have instilled that as well. If you don't accept younger creationism, you're not a real Christian.
Or not only that, Steve,
Scientia.
but Ken Ham has continually said that if you hold to evolution, then you're undermining the atonement of Jesus, which in Christian thinking is a terrible thing to
Blasphemy.
do.
That's blasphemy.
Oh my,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, I've undermined Jesus's atonement. So yeah.
Scientia.
Yep.
Creationists will say that all of the layers that make up the Grand Canyon were laid down by one rainstorm, and then somehow it also eroded out the Grand Canyon on one rainstorm. Can you tell us why this is totally impossible? Thank you.
The rock cycle process, I think, is what they really then need to research, and they just need to go into the sedimentary process and understand that after you have deposition, then there's this whole series of events that must occur to make the deposited sediments solid. And those things, first of all, they don't take they take a long amount of time. They don't happen immediately. So if you're going to have, again, your Grand Canyon forming, the sedimentary layers that make up the canyon forming, each of those layers themselves must go through this process of concretion and sedimentation before it actually becomes solid rock. Otherwise, it would be just mud.
Yeah,
After
and
that,
there's also that I've been to the Grand Canyon a lot. I've rafted through it. I've done all sorts of stuff there, and it's not just. There's also multiple layers of igneous rock.
Yep.
There's sedimentary rock. There's also marble. There's what do you call it? Limestone, and they're all although they most are sedimentary, but there are igneous layers in between.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for them to say, oh, okay, well it was all laid down at once and then all eroded at once. That really does not work with the model that they propose.
Yeah, and there's also disconformities that obviously have been eroded.
Yeah.
And what they've been trying to do lately, I'm sure you remember this. I think it was Austin that was really pushing it. But they were saying, oh look, Mount St. Helens formed this big old little Grand Canyon, they call it, which nobody called it that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all power. I think it was two pyroclastic major flows.
Yes.
That caused it. How the hell does that have anything to do with strata layers?
Well, and they don't understand it's not sedimentary either. I brought this up with Joe as well with the Mount St. Helens, is they don't understand that those are not sediments. Technically, it's not a sedimentary rock. It is an unsedimented layer of loose, like you said, pyroclastic flows, basically mud flows and lava,
alluvial,
ash and lahars. So it hasn't been compacted and sedimented together to form actual rock. It's still just soft when it was eroded. And going back to the Grand Canyon, and this is one thing we actually do know of many floods that have occurred. And what happens when you have a huge flood of some sort? Most of these floods that we actually see on the Earth's surface, not in the strata below ground, is that real floods create linear patterns. They don't create a meandering stream that you see in the Grand Canyon.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going into this whole idea that any water formation that we see on land must be from a flood, when they don't understand there's many different ways that water interacts with, not only just rock, but the soils around, the life around it. And we know what type of water interaction it was because we have examples of it currently going on. We have examples of it in the past. People always like to bring up, the Lake Missoula or the Lake Agassiz flood in Washington State, where the glacial dam broke. And there's this real treasure trove of evidence that you can even see from satellite images that shows you what actually does occur when a flood happens. You get these, huge sandbars. Portland, Oregon is basically built right next to this huge sandbar from the flood, and it was backwash that went down the Willamette River and formed eskers and other, formations that look very similar to glacial formations. So there we have a real-life example, and we can say, look, here's what a real flood looks like, and it's not a marine flood. This is fresh water. How do you then extrapolate that into showing us the whole Earth had a flood at some point? And like you're bringing up earlier, Steve, there are some places that don't have any sediments. So why don't they have any sediments? What does that mean? How does that fit into your flood hypothesis, the model that you're trying to present?
Well, let me ask you, because I'm not asking you as to look at somebody's motives, not per se, but I mean, in your opinion, when Steve Austin does things like what he did with the Mount St. Helens flood, which is obviously they're just saying, oh look, it looks like this, therefore it's the same thing. Knowing that he has a PhD in geology, knowing that he knows full well the difference, knowing that his understanding of argon potassium dating was pretty sound, and that he had to deliberately manipulate some numbers to fool people. When we look at these PhDs, creationists, some Humphreys and Tompkins, and Austin and Georgina Prudhomme, her name Prudhomme, yeah. How much do you think is actually deliberate deception, and how much do you think is they've actually pushed it so far back in their brain that they don't even think they're actually lying anymore? Because there has to be some cognitive dissonance there somewhere. I think he's having computer problems. He thought he was masturbating really hard. Hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. I usually wait till after they hang out, but I don't judge.
Just use lots of lube. Lots of lube.
Scientia, if I could ask you another question, if you could help explain.
He's having computer problems.
Oh no.
He was having it in the debate too. I think he needs to reload, or because it was just making that weird, sound. Not judging. But all I can say is Rihanna gets here, and he takes a 5-minute. Don't judge it. No. Coincidence, right?
Yep.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Scientia,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, your computer was just making this weird noise again. So
sorry.
So
it's this microphone I have. I if I bump it, I think is what's going on.
No.
So yeah, as far as the question you had about do they actually believe it, or is it something that they have kind of convinced themselves that is true? In my conversations with Hovind, I think that he believes it from a theological sense, in that, and Wayne was bringing this up earlier, he believes it that he must believe it or else he's not a Christian. But the other thing about Hovind is that I think he believes it because it's his livelihood to believe it and to present it in that way. So I think it's both. I think he's doing so because he's deliberately doing so because he thinks that's the way that he is pleasing God. And I also think that he's doing it because he's making money off of it, pure and simple.
Do you think that Eric has more of a knowledge that is complete bullshit than Ovind and Kent?
Does Kent's son Eric?
Yeah. Because he comes across as so just disingenuous. I mean, he's nice. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we had a decent hangout, but I mean, he reeks of somebody of like a used car salesman.
Yeah.
That's selling you a lemon.
Yeah.
Well, he's also been highly indoctrinated too. So, I mean, he's been thoroughly brainwashed, and you know, he's been trained his whole life how to talk to people about this. So, for him, it's almost an automatic reaction without thought. You know, he's not challenged any of it, so it will seem disingenuous because he's basically just parroting everything that he's heard his entire life without questioning it.
Yeah, I agree.
I've seen Eric, like, there was once on the TVN with Ken Ham and Hugh Ross. There's a panel that I uploaded on my channel. And Eric does have a more open mind than Kent. Like, sometimes he'll pick up on things and go, ah, that's interesting. But then he, you know, when he comes back next time, he must have gone through his father's material or something, and then he just like you said, he parrots his father's material as a response.
Right. It's just it's mental conditioning. It would be the same as what a lot of people go through in a cult structure, religious cults or even political cults, where they get into this. They might not agree entirely with the ideology or the dogma, but they go along with it as a way to be as part of the in-group. You know, they do it because they feel that they need to, so that they can be part of something greater than themselves.
Yeah, and Scientia is right. I think it's financial gain. I mean, look at the Ark encounter that Ken Ham is doing. I don't know, Scientia, if you're keeping up to date with that, but I mean that's just. Did you see that they had to invent and model animals that never existed in the fossil record? In one of Ken Ham's behind the scene videos, he's asking the artist, okay, what's this animal? And he's like, oh, it's a mix between what we see in the fossil record and an animal today. And so this must be the ancestor to all the, you know. And I'm just like, so you're lying to everyone who's going to enter this ark and at the same time pay you.
Well, the most interesting about
and at the same time, kind of give a hint towards evolution.
Yes,
that's a bit frightening.
And that's what I was just about to bring up is on the answers on in Genesis site. I have actually seen them use known, you know, if you want to call them transitional fossils, missing links, whatever. They've used like Pachycetus and said, hey, look at this. This is, you know, the kind that all the whales came from. You know, they have actually used real transitional fossils and said these are our kinds, which is utterly strange.
Well, they're utterly strange. No surprise there.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Scientia.
You go.
I know a geologist who worked for a natural gas company, and they would hire him to locate natural gas wells and also coal seams. And can you tell us, are they predictable based on the geological column, and can they be used as evidence for a geological column? Thank you.
Yeah, this is so there's what's the guy's name? Geo Land guy. He's a guy on Twitter who is actually a geologist. He's young at the Creationist. And I remember my first conversations with him were just about this, that, you know, we know where particular seams of coal, natural gas, oil are, because we know that those are the paleo environments that had certain conditions that would produce those things. So when, you know, petrochemical people are out looking for new resources, that's exactly what they do. They use evolutionary biology to do so. They use geological maps and look for certain time periods where there were certain climatic conditions, and then they know where they're going to drill or dig for coal, natural oil, and gas. because those are where you find them. You find them in these environments that where the climate was stable for long enough to create large deposits. Got quiet all of a sudden.
It's happening.
I'm just wondering. This might be an off. Well, it's in regards to the in the debate, but I didn't see the debate. Did Joe bring up the waters rose up so many cubits above the mountains?
No, he didn't.
To you,